Good morning, and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. Thank you, Conley. Thank you very much. That was my Elvis impersonation, in case you were trying to locate that in your impersonation library. What's going on out there, Robert Phoenix? Getting ready to take a blowtorch to the state of California today. I wish I could be meditative. I wish I could be contemplative. I wish I could vibrate and rise above the cacophony and the din, the constant clash of opposition, the dangerous and disastrous dance of duality. Yes, rising above it all into one sphere of unified consciousness. Yes, that's what I aspire to. But today, it ain't going to happen. No, today is, I'm going to put California in the crosshairs. My old state. God, I loved California. I absolutely loved that place. Had some of the best years and best times of my life there. I'm not sure how conducive it was to actually growing up, to be honest with you. You know, Leo on the ascendant, Leo rising, Uranus right on the ascendant in Leo. It was, hey. Jupiter in the 5th house, trying that Uranus. Fun times. And now here I am in Texas, a very different gravitational sphere, if you will. By the way, I want to, before I jump into taking my flamethrower to California, I wanted to just talk about a TV series that I've always known has, well, it's been around for a long time. This TV series isn't even in production anymore. That's how. I mean, it's been a long time. The series is Danger Man, and you can find all the Danger Man episodes on YouTube. They're all really high quality. So if you want to binge watch an interesting TV series from the past, Danger Man is your entertainment of choice. It's a really fascinating series with Patrick McGoohan, who played the number 6 in The Prisoner, and he played Edward Longshanks. And he also was in a movie called Scanners. He's one of the great actors of our time. And Danger Man was created by a guy by the name of Lou Grade, who was a heavyweight in English TV and films. And a fellow by the name of Smart. What's not David Smart? What is this? Ralph Smart. Ralph Smart created the episodes and wrote all the episodes. Now, the premise is that Patrick McGoohan is a spy. Spy series were really, really big back in the 60s. Why were spy series really big back in the 60s? By the way, Danger Man was created also in part by Ian Fleming, who, of course, wrote the James Bond novels. So they were trying to create a Bond-like character for TV. And, in fact, there's some Bond crossovers. M plays a couple of roles on the series. And Patrick McGoohan says his name. His name is John Drake. And Patrick McGoohan says his name like James Bond. Drake, John Drake. And what's really cool about the McGoohan character is that he doesn't use a gun. He doesn't use a gun, and he doesn't seduce women. It's very fascinating, and McGoohan was very clear about this with the character, as he wanted it to be a family show. He wanted it to be a family show. So he's good with his fists and does a little judo, but the show is absolutely fascinating. And some of the series or some of the episodes, it's all out there. I mean, you can just see kind of their unspooling. It's always amazing to go back in time and watch something, and you just sit there and go, wow. Because they're kind of laying the agenda out. And it's all kind of Cold War stuff, Russia, Soviet Union. There's some stuff in Cuba, Africa, a lot of on-location shooting. There's even a scene where this like rebel Israeli group is trying to kill this guy who was in one of the camps, this Dusseldorf, and they were working on vaccines, and they were using the prisoners to try the vaccines out. And so they come after this guy, and it's absolutely fascinating, because McGowan basically is saying, hey, you're becoming just like him. You're becoming just like the Nazis in your fevered state to bring justice to him, not in a court of law, but in a sort of a court of themselves out in the desert. It's a fascinating episode. Anyway, I highly recommend Danger Man. You can find them all on YouTube. And the reason why we had so many series about spy shows, they took Danger Man, they created Man from U.N.C.L.E. Ian Fleming had a bit of a hand in creating that show with Robert Vaughn and what's his name? David McCallum. And, it has a kind of that British feel to it. And the reason why they created all these spy shows is because they were, again, in this process of telling us, it's like, here we go. It's show and tell. We're going to show you. We're going to tell you what's going on here. That these spy networks, these intelligence agencies, these surveillance networks, they're everywhere. And now they're on TV. And even with a show like Don Smart, or I'm sorry, Get Smart with Don Knotts, making fun of it. And by the way, there's some very interesting episodes of Get Smart where there's predictive programming involved. We had I Spy with Robert Culp and Bill Cosby. Of course, that series launched Bill Cosby really into our consciousness, and we're dealing with that whole duality piece, black and white, and so it's all kind of wrapped up in there. And that's why the spy series were ubiquitous. They were everywhere. Little Neptune and Scorpio from an astrological perspective also probably had something to do with that. Scorpio being dark, concealed, Neptune film, cinema, to some degree media. We loved our spies during the 60s and the 70s. And of course, Roger Moore has left us not that long ago. Not my favorite Bond, not even close. Of course, it's Connery, who is in exile in the Bahamas because he did not pay his taxes. Interesting stuff. By the way, I am broadcasting to you live through my cell phone because everybody said yesterday that it was the best audio they've ever heard. I bought this really expensive mixer and this expensive mic, and I'm just doing this through my cell phone, and everybody's like clapping their hands. Isn't that funny? I know. No. Speaking of spy, this is a little spy thing right here. And now, broadcasting to you live from Austin, Texas, it's Alex Jones. Okay, shall we get to the topic at hand, the topic du jour? Yep, we're talking about California today. And I ran across an article that I'd like to share with you. It's from a very interesting little website called Canada Free Press. And it is Governor Jerry Brown facilitating the inevitable California collapse. When will this guy ever go away? He is now entering into that Henry Kissinger, George Soros, well, we had Zbigniew Brzezinski kind of territory. He's my mother's age. And he'll be Jerry Brown. Check it out. Jerry Brown will be 80 years old next year. And this guy is the governor of California. It's his second time as governor. He oversaw the spraying during his first tenure as governor. He oversaw the spraying of the state of California because there was some beetle. Is it a beetle or a fly? Anyway, he oversaw the spraying of the state of California. And we used to watch at night. We used to watch the planes and the helicopters come out and spray all over the place. We'd have these, kind of thick goo-like substances on our windshields. I mean, it was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And he oversaw that. He didn't give a shit about that. He's like, yeah, we're just going to let him spray. Not a big deal. And he was governor for a very long time, and eventually he made the rounds. He wound up being the chief of police, which is suitable for an Aries like himself, for Oakland. And then he moved into being mayor of Oakland. And then he went back to being governor. When is this guy going to go away? Now, I've said this before, and if I apologize if I'm repeating myself here, because there are a lot of you who listen to the show, and you'll hear some material at times that is regurgitated only for the sake of context. And what I'm referring to is that in Ruth Montgomery's book about Edgar Cayce, I think it's about Edgar Cayce. If not, it's one of her other books. Anyway, she talks about the governor of California, and she's referring to Jerry Brown. And she says that he is not from this world. He's an alien. That's what she's saying. Jerry Brown is an alien. Maybe he's a crypto-terrestrial. Maybe he's a Darrow. He's governor of California. Anyway, let's get into this now. Oh, by the way, he's the guy that basically said every kid in California needs to be vaccinated. Like, he could have stopped that. So total social Marxist agenda. The state is going to tell you what to do. And coming from an Aries, by the way, in the playing card system, Jerry Brown is the ace of spades. He's the Magi. It's a very powerful card. Very powerful card. And his chart, he's got that Sun conjunction of the midheaven in Aries. And he's got a Sun-Saturn conjunction. He's got Moon-Pluto. He doesn't have a lot of air in his chart. He's got Jupiter in Aquarius. Of course he's got Jupiter in Aquarius. And he's got a ton of planets in Taurus. Mars, Uranus, Venus, Mercury, all 10th house. He's fixed. He's intractable. And believe it or not, some of those planets, what do we have here? He's got a Sun-Moon square. That's a big one. It's a big deal. He's got Moon in Cancer, Moon-Pluto conjunction in Cancer. So all of his emotions are hidden, and to some extent, those emotions might even be a bit, diabolical. Moon-Pluto in the 12th house, it's domineering, it's emotional dominance. And he's got that Sun, what is it? What is that square? Let me just check that out. Well, he's got a Neptune square to Mercury and Neptune square to Venus. And we've seen this before. What happens with those squares? Not always the most, I don't want to say truthful, because people have those aspects. They always get like a little irritated with me. But it's not always forthcoming. I'll give you an example. I've brought this up again before. Back in the day, the Oakland A's were going to move down to Jack London Square. Everything was rolling. They had plans. They had the right people in place. They had the land. And all of a sudden, Jerry Brown slammed the door shut on that, said it's not happening, sold that land to a friend of his, and then put a gag order on everybody from the A's group that they can't talk about it. Okay, so there's your dictatorial Aries Sun conjunct the midheaven, and that's where we get into the squares, right, with Mercury and Venus. So, and it's not Neptune, it's Pluto. Well, that's a different energy. I had to just recheck that. I got to be on top of my game here. By the way, I didn't sleep much last night. So that is using Venus, right, relationships, Pluto. It's like a strong arm tactic. Mercury, Pluto square, strong arm. Especially, we're talking fixed sign here, right? Taurus. Anyway, the guy's not human. He's an alien. That's the only bad part about the doing the show on my phone. Somebody calls, kind of interrupts things. All right, let me read you this article. This is from Canada Free Press. It's interesting here. California, this is by Katie Grimes. And this is about from a year ago. So it's not new. This is not a new article. But the information, I think, is pretty current. Here we go. This is a quote from Brown. California is definitely back. Governor Jerry Brown boasted in 2014. Brown then proclaimed the state a job creation engine, proving he was still living in the 1960s. However, Brown has shown little stomach for sensible tax and regulatory cuts and instead pays lip service to the media about how fiscally prudent he is, and everything he touches turns brown. For a state, $130 billion upside down in budget debt and another $750 billion of long-term unfunded public employee pension debt, the estrangement between what the Democrats in charge say and do and what Californians know and live daily continues to grow. Things are not rosy in California, despite what Jerry Brown and the liberal propagandist media tells you. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Dan Walters, one of the state's few journalistic realists, reported this week, remember this a year ago, that California's unemployment insurance system is stuck in a deep hole, with the state paying out about $5.5 billion a year in jobless benefits. And they've been reporting for years about the $10 billion the state borrowed from the federal government to cover the payments. California borrowed $10 billion to cover their jobless benefits. Wow. That's a lot of money. And yet, they bitch about the federal government. And I'm not a big fan of the federal government, but you can't always have it both ways. And it owes $313 million to the State Disability Insurance Trust Fund after taking the money to pay for the debt service on the federal loans. So they took $313 million out of state disability insurance, and then they moved it over to pay for the federal loans. Wow. That's kind of amazing. Jerry Brown's high-speed train project, doomed from the beginning as nothing more than the cash cow for cronies. Of course, he is a big crony politician. We saw that with the stadium in Oakland. His buddy got the land and built mixed-use properties on there. Essentially, he became a contractor for Agenda 2030. Has been besieged with problems from the beginning, including many legal troubles. That is his Jonah, but he stubbornly refuses to give it up, wasting millions of taxpayers' funds with nothing to show for it. They've been working on this train for, 10, 15 years now? His misguided Delta Tunnels project isn't any better. Both projects are bold reminders that Democrats are incompetent leaders and even worse, project managers. Okay, I'm trying to stay clear of some politics here, but in this case, it's quite true. Democrats are much better at creating committees. They're much better at creating jobs inside the government versus business. It's just a different template. It's a completely different template. So one of the things that is really going on here is that California is becoming not just a kind of a state that has its own kind of maverick and radical and subversive agenda for the rest of the country, as we've seen with California essentially blocking travel to any states that do not kind of fall into their hold on a second, what is going on here? Yeah, it should be okay. That is not going into their, it does not fit their program. If it doesn't fit their social program, whether it's Texas, whether it's North Carolina, they are going to say, no, you can't travel there. We're not going to pay for the travel. Okay, but it's extending beyond that. This idea that California wants its political and ideological reach to move into places like Southern Oregon, for instance, which is really still kind of red. The only truly blue areas of Oregon are Portland, Eugene, and Ashland. Everything else is pretty much red. But it wants to extend this reach, and basically, I think the plan here is to kind of create a 5 to 6 state sort of regional secession. That's my sense. That is my. Now, will it happen? It's doubtful. But every year, the surrounding states tend to become more Californicated. Like during this last election, Arizona, which shows up as a red state most of the time, was kind of moving towards purple. And Nevada, which has been a red state for a long time, also moving towards purple. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that some Californians, or quite a few Californians, to be honest with you, especially in Arizona, have moved out of the state. And they still want to have their California consciousness, pervade where they're living. Now, this is an interesting piece here. California has a law on the books that has been in force since 1953. This law on the books has been in force since 1953. And this is from Newsweek. I'm going to bust this out from Newsweek. And here's this is not from a year ago. This is actually from May of this year. The so-called California resistance of President Donald Trump took a seemingly sharp left turn into post-war American history earlier this week when a state assemblyman proposed an amendment that would allow communists to openly work in state government. Well, this is ridiculous because communists are already working in the state government. By the way, Jerry Brown, he's a Jesuit. That's all you got to know. Now, Trump's a Jesuit too, but apparently, I don't know. Trump's not from the same planet, the same Jesuit planet that Brown is from. Anyway, Rob Bonta, a Democrat who represents part of the, this is Newsweek, this is their label, not mine, part of the liberal San Francisco Bay Area, argued that the amendment would fix a 1953 law that made membership in the Communist Party sufficient cause for dismissal from state employment. Of course, we had the House Committee on Un-American Activities. We had sort of the Red Scare, which was taking place in Hollywood, headed up, well, it wasn't headed up, but one of the key figures in that Red Scare was Ronald Reagan, of course, on the side of the good old USA. And the Red Scare, that thing, that was, that was just, it was like, okay, here we go. We're going to show you that there's communism. Everybody's afraid of communism. Everybody's reading about communism. This is the Cold War. We're going to show you that communism does exist. It exists in the media. There are screenwriters. There are filmmakers. Yes, indeed. They have been infiltrated. And we're going to give you about a dozen people, and we're going to do public lynching for people like Paul Robeson, for one, Dalton Trumbo for another, and then we're going to shut it all down. We're going to shut it all down. We're going to basically, do a little bloodletting, and then we'll shut it all down. Because guess what? It does exist, and we're going to give you a sense of moral, social vindication. But let's be clear. There are communists everywhere. I'm not paranoid. It's just the way it is. If you, again, go to the great work of Anthony Sutton, look at the left-right paradigm, look at Skull and Bones, and Skull and Bones equally distributes, and I said I wouldn't be doing this, but I am, equally distributes conservatives and liberals accordingly. William F. Buckley, Skull and Bones member, one of the most how do we say this? Archetypal arch conservatives you'll ever find. All right, so let's keep going here. Bonta's bill, known as AB 22, would be there's that number 22, the master builder, would delete references to the Communist Party in this requirement if it became California law. It passed the Assembly 41-30. It now heads the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats. If it is passed by that chamber, the bill would land on the desk of Jerry Brown, a Democrat. A senior advisor to Brown declined to answer questions about the legislation. And here we go. The Communist Party USA praised the legislation. It corrects a wrong because the party has never advocated for the violent overthrow of the government. Party Vice Chair Rosanna Cambrone told me, quite to the contrary, our history is one of continuously working for the expansion of the democratic process. That's an interesting sentence, isn't it? That they're linking communism with the democratic process. The party's role in the age of Trump is to share our vision of a better world, one that promotes inclusion, equality, and justice. In other words, a society that puts people and planet before profits. Absolute bullshit. Absolute bullshit. It doesn't put people and planet before profits. It puts the state before people. It is not about the individual. It is about the group. And the group at this level would be the state. It would be the Politburo. This is the nature. We've seen it again and again and again. And even if you dress it up and make it look socially acceptable, like China, for instance, well, I tell you, you cut against the grain in China, and you want to run your own program in China, you're screwed. You just can't. You cannot cross the Chinese government. You can get in. You can play their game. You can probably be engaged in some level of corruption and bribery, which I'm sure exists at many levels inside the Chinese government. But if you want to freelance and go on your own, or you want to be a dissident, you become an instant organ donor. That's what happens. It's really a technical cleanup bill, Bonta told me the other day. After the State Assembly passed the bill and moved it to the Senate, a native of Sacramento who graduated from Yale College and the Yale Law School, Bonta also told me that he is not now, nor has ever been, a member of the Communist Party. Okay. And while he says he has sympathy for veterans of the Korean War and other anti-communist conflicts, those who have painted him as a red sympathizer are wildly out of line. There's absolutely no merit to their claims that this bill promotes communism, he said. You know what that reminds me of? Another typical California bait and switch bullshit tactic. It reminds me of when California passed a bill that would not allow same-sex marriage. The people had spoken. Yes, the people had spoken. Well, that just wasn't good enough for the state of California. They found a judge who decided to overturn that. One judge overturned it. And guess what? Same-sex union. And it's like, oh, don't worry. We just want to get married. We just want to be in the same kind of classification as everybody else who can get married. And we can share benefits and all the other goodies that come with being married. Then we can get divorced just like everybody else. We can become bored and miserable just like everybody else. No, they're good marriages, don't get me wrong. We don't want to change what's happening in the schools. No. Back off. No, your schools are fine. Don't be afraid. Don't be paranoid. We don't want your children. Fast forward, what are they doing in the California schools? They're teaching children about anal sex. They've got the whole gender dysphoria front and center. I mean, it is a mess. I'll give you a little personal anecdote. So I was living in, this is when my son was born, I'm living in the Bay Area. I'm living in Albany, little town next to Berkeley, right? And then I moved to Point Richmond. And my son is forming friendships, bonds with kids. and he forms this one bond with this boy who I didn't really like. It's like he wouldn't look me in the eye. It's like, look me in the eye, kid. No, he wouldn't look me in the eye. Anyway, they were becoming friends. So you want to foster a friendship on some level. So his parents were these two women. Whatever. Okay, whatever. Well, one of them was a teacher, and the other one ran a fertility clinic. And all three of the kids were like donor kids. And the parents were, the women were pretty nice. I'm not making a judgment on these women. I'm not. Just please understand this, because I know that they love their children. But it was a weird kind of social rap to deal with in a lot of ways. It was just very strange. He had another kid, a buddy of his, and nice kid, really cool kid. Mom was pretty nice. And next door was mom's sister and her partner and, their kids. And supposedly these kids were this boy's cousins, when in fact they were actually children of the same donor that this boy next door, their cousins, was. It was like, okay, at some point in time, they're maybe going to be told, I don't know, that their cousins aren't really their cousins, but they're half brothers, right? They're cousins and half brothers because they share the same sperm. I mean, this was the world I was living in, right? It was like, wow, it's interesting, right? I'm not making judgments on the people. A lot of those people were quite nice, and they love their kids. But from a social perspective, it's a very different experience. I guess what I'm trying to allude to here is that just because this guy, Bonta, is saying, hey, don't worry about it, we're just cleaning this up, it's disingenuous. Says, continued attempts on my attempts to solicit admission from Bonta that he was in fact a secret communist elicited only laughter on the legislator's part. Given the prominence of California as a redoubt of anti-Trump sentiment, I could not resist wondering if Bonta was trying to provoke our easily provoked president with this legislation. His bill, after all, was introduced in early December, less than a month after a presidential election. To many, was an unwelcome return to the politics of the 1950s. It's not a message to Washington, he told me. Nevertheless, it's being taken that way. Although Bonta's legislation does not reference Trump, many of the on the right wing took it as further evidence that California has become a state of constant provocation, whether it is declaring sanctuary cities, celebrating the recreational use of marijuana, or promoting bilingual education. Well, I think it's a bit deeper than that. And I think what we're seeing here is we're having a complete realignment of ideology and geography and loyalty and boundaries in this country. I mean, we can see it in the world, right? We can see it in the world. The nationalist versus globalist breakdown, and we can even see it inside of this country, where there is obviously, very strong states of strong globalist ties. Now, where it's all headed, I don't know, but I can tell you that it is not going to abate while Trump is in office. It's not going to abate while Trump is in office. It is going to continue to gain some momentum and acceleration, and unfortunately, the division in the country will continue to take place because the world is divided. The world is divided. The world has been split into balkanized states of consciousness, and that's just where it's at. And if you don't want to align with one state or the other, you're There's very little that we can do at this point in time to bridge the differences. And I think there are some issues and there are some pieces that can be agreed upon. And there are others that just are not really going to work, because of the social doctrine that is part of both of these ideologies. Globalism, nationalism. Local, rural, organic, analog, synthetic, international. Right? It's interesting. It is interesting, and we certainly get to work out the differences and the duality here on planet Earth. Terra, whatever this holographic matrix that we're inhabiting truly is. And along the way, we have our own spiritual lessons that come into play. My challenge as somebody who gets on my computer and broadcasts every single day is to do my best to remain human. This is our challenge. To know what we know, and to understand what we know, while at the same time not becoming so rigid and so calcified, so that we wind up creating barriers and create more walls than anything else. I think it's really essential that we are involved in this dance and this interplay with discernment and being able to filter through information, while at the same time not allowing ourselves to become so dictatorial. And dictatorial can be really, it can be galvanizing in some ways. Like when you say something is right or something is wrong, when you say this is black and this is white, and you do with enough vigor and enough force, and sometimes I do it, sometimes I feel pretty strongly about certain things, there's passion and there's energy, and people respond to that. There's a reason why Rush Limbaugh is successful. There's a reason why Michael Savage is successful. There's a reason why Alex Jones is successful. There's a reason why on the other side Rachel Maddow is successful. There's a reason why Bill Maher has been successful. There's a reason why Ann Coulter is successful. Because what they do is they galvanize and synthesize the body politique of their perspective and their point of view. And they're unapologetic for it. On both sides. It gets people riled up. It gets people talking. It gets ratings. The harder thing to do, the more difficult thing to do, is to have a sense and an understanding of sort of the bigger picture without becoming a caricature and without becoming part of the same tyrannical force. That is one of the most difficult things to do. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of inner work for that to manifest and come to fruition in our lives. How is that Capricorn full moon, by the way? Yowza. What do we have next? The Aquarian full moon? Boy, these full moons have been intense. This full moon cycle has been powerful stuff, man. Really, really powerful stuff. So it looks like we've come to the end of today's show. About 38 minutes, 54 seconds. Using the super advanced and highly sophisticated mobile recording suite that has been provided to me by my comrades at Spreaker. Check out Danger Man on YouTube and get into the fine acting of Patrick McGoohan. Not to be confused with Patrick Macnee, although I think they're like loosely related. Patrick Macnee, of course, John Steed. And the other really interesting series, you want to get into some MI6 stuff, The Avengers. There's your interesting series. Break some of that stuff down. Of course, Patrick McGoohan went on to create The Prisoner, which is probably one of the best TV series of all time. Number 6. John Drake. Of course, he says he's not John Drake from Danger Man, but we all know he is. We all know he is. All right. There we go. I just wanted to give you a heads up. What's coming at you from the West? What's coming at you from the red state, the really red state of California, in the attempt to essentially radicalize the surrounding states and create a ideological wall between them and the flyover areas. Just here to share the information with you on this wonderful 11th of June. You know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real. Your heart to stay open as possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. This has been 15 Minutes of Flame. I'll be back 24 hours from today.